Wall Street thought this story had already been written. Canada would buy 88 F-35A fighter jets. Lockheed Martin would secure another major Western customer. Royal Canadian Air Force would join an increasingly F-35-dominated network of allied air forces, and that would be the end of the story. But in 2026, that assumption no longer looks quite so comfortable. Welcome to Skyjet Wings, where we look beyond the headlines and examine what changing military technology, defense strategy, and geopolitics actually mean. And today we need to talk about Canada, Sweden, the F-35, and the Gripen E. Because Canada has not cancelled the F-35, it has not officially selected Gripen either. But something much more interesting is happening. Canada is questioning whether its future air power should depend almost completely on one country, one defense industry, and one fighter ecosystem. And Sweden has recognized the opportunity. Canada originally committed to acquiring 88 F-35A fighters, with the government confirming the selection in January 2023. But the political and strategic environment has changed dramatically. Canada launched a review of the F-35 acquisition, and as recently as April 2026, Defense Minister David McGuinty confirmed that the review was still continuing. Canada is financially committed to the first 16 aircraft, but the future composition of the complete fighter fleet remains politically important and closely watched. And this is where Sweden enters the picture. Saab has been discussing something far more ambitious than simply shipping Swedish-manufactured fighters across the Atlantic. In late 2025, Saab confirmed discussions involving Canada and Bombardier around the possibility of building Gripen fighters under license in Canada. Reports suggested such an industrial arrangement could potentially create thousands of Canadian jobs. That changes the argument completely. This is no longer simply about which fighter is better. It becomes a much bigger question. Which fighter arrangement gives Canada more control over its own defense industrial future?
And here is where the story becomes even more important. In May 2026, Canada officially entered negotiations to procure Saab's GlobalEye airborne early warning and control aircraft. GlobalEye itself is based on a Bombardier business jet platform. The Canadian government said the proposed arrangement could support around 3,000 Canadian aerospace and defense jobs. Prime Minister Mark Carney later described plans under which a significant share of future GlobalEye production could take place in Canada. So Sweden is no longer standing outside Canada's defense industry asking to be invited in. Saab is already developing a much deeper industrial relationship with Canada. And in my opinion, this could be the most important part of the entire story. The question is not whether Gripen can simply defeat the F-35 in a specification comparison. That is too simplistic. The F-35 remains one of the most sophisticated combat aircraft in the world. Its major advantages include stealth, sensor fusion, networking, and integration across a huge multinational operational ecosystem. Canada also selected the aircraft after an extensive competitive process, so pretending that Gripen suddenly makes the F-35 irrelevant would be misleading. But Gripen offers a completely different strategic philosophy. Sweden designed the Gripen family around a country that expected its major air bases to be attacked during war. That produced an emphasis on dispersed operations, relatively small support footprints, rapid servicing, and the ability to operate away from large traditional bases. For Canada, that becomes interesting because Canada is not defending a small geographical area. It is defending one of the largest territories on Earth, including an enormous Arctic region where infrastructure can be limited and distances are extreme. Gripen E also carries modern sensors, including an AESA radar, infrared search and track system, advanced electronic warfare equipment, and sophisticated communications. Saab lists a combat turnaround time of roughly 15 to 25 minutes for the Gripen E series. This kind of operational flexibility matters in an environment where survival may depend not only on stealth, but also on mobility, dispersal, fast servicing, and the ability to keep aircraft operating even when major bases are under pressure.
Then there is Meteor. Gripen can employ the MBDA Meteor Beyond Visual Range Air-to-Air Missile, a weapon using a throttleable ramjet propulsion system and data link updates. Saab lists its operational range as more than 100 kilometers and its speed at above Mach 4. But the important point is not a sensational claim that Meteor automatically defeats every competing missile. Its real significance is energy management. A ramjet-powered missile can maintain propulsion deeper into an engagement, potentially giving pilots greater flexibility against maneuvering targets at long distance. That gives Gripen a serious long-range air combat capability and makes it far more than simply a lower-cost alternative. Still, Canada faces a major problem if it seriously considers a mixed fleet. Two fighter types mean two training systems, two maintenance ecosystems, different spare parts, different technical pipelines, different weapons integration requirements, potentially higher logistical complexity. The F-35 also offers something Gripen cannot reproduce simply by being cheaper or easier to operate: scale. Hundreds of F-35s are spreading across Allied air forces. That creates enormous interoperability advantages during coalition operations. So the argument for Gripen cannot simply be that it is another modern fighter. The stronger argument is sovereignty and diversification. And Canada is now giving us more evidence that diversification has become part of its strategic thinking. In July 2026, reports indicated that Canada had reached an agreement to become an observer in the Global Combat Air Program, or GCAP, the next-generation fighter effort involving Britain, Italy, and Japan. Observer status does not mean Canada has committed to buying the future aircraft, but symbolically it matters. Canada is looking beyond today's fighter decision and establishing relationships with another advanced combat aircraft ecosystem that could become operational around the middle of the next decade.
Think about what is happening here. Canada is reviewing the full scale of its F-35 commitment. It is negotiating with Saab over GlobalEye. Saab has discussed Canadian Gripen production, and Canada is moving closer to GCAP. Taken together, this does not prove that Gripen has won, but it does suggest that Ottawa is thinking much more seriously about strategic autonomy than it was only a few years ago. Canada appears to be asking a question that many countries are now asking: how much defense dependence is too much, even when that dependence is on your closest ally? And that brings us to the biggest question: could Canada eventually operate both? A smaller F-35 force could provide stealth penetration, coalition interoperability, and high-end sensor capabilities. Gripen could potentially provide numbers, distributed operations, and a larger domestic industrial footprint. On paper, that sounds attractive. In reality, it would create major logistical and budgetary challenges. Running two completely different fighter fleets is expensive. Pilots need separate training pipelines. Technicians need separate qualifications. Spare parts inventories become more complicated. Weapons integration becomes more difficult. Commanders must manage different operational strengths and limitations. So a mixed fleet would only make sense if Canada believed the strategic advantages were worth the additional cost and complexity. That is why Canada's final decision cannot be reduced to aircraft performance alone. It is a decision about what type of Air Force Canada wants for the next 30 or 40 years. Does it prioritize maximum integration with the American-led F-35 ecosystem? Does it accept the complexity of a mixed fighter fleet in exchange for greater industrial and strategic diversification? Or does it eventually pursue another combination entirely, while positioning itself for the next generation through GCAP? These are no longer theoretical questions. They go directly to Canada's Arctic strategy, industrial policy, alliance relationships, and future military independence.
My personal view is this: the most important victory Sweden has achieved so far is not selling Gripen to Canada. That has not happened. The real victory is that Gripen has returned to the conversation. A fighter competition that appeared completely finished has become part of a much wider debate about sovereignty, industrial capacity, Arctic defense, supply chain security, and Canada's dependence on the United States. And Saab's growing Canadian relationship through GlobalEye makes that conversation much harder to dismiss.
This could therefore become one of the most consequential Canadian defense decisions in decades, not because Canada is suddenly turning away from America, but because Canada appears increasingly interested in having more than one option. And in modern geopolitics, having options is itself a form of power. The final decision may still favor the F-35. Canada may continue with all 88 aircraft. It may explore a mixed fleet, or it may use current negotiations to strengthen its own bargaining position. But one thing is clear. The assumption that Canada's fighter future was completely settled is no longer as strong as it once appeared. So now I want to hear from you. Should Canada complete the full purchase of 88 F-35As? Should it create a mixed fleet of F-35s and Gripen Es? Or would operating two fighter types create more problems than strategic advantages? Share your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy original military aviation analysis without the usual surface-level headlines, like this video, subscribe to Skyjet Wings, and turn on notifications, because the next major shift in global air power may already be happening quietly. This is Skyjet Wings. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.